Okay, cool. I'm sure there'll be some other folks arriving in just a second, but for now, let's kick off in the spirit of time. Guys, welcome. And Patrick, I thought it'd be useful for you, just a real quick one, just to give you a bit of background on who these entrepreneurs are. I won't go through them all individually, but the types of folks in this cohort and why we do this. I know we spoke about a month ago, probably, and I told you then that Unreasonable exists to help entrepreneurs solving the world's toughest problems, scale what they do. And over the years, we realized that we have a massive responsibility to ensure that these entrepreneurs themselves thrive alongside their businesses. So this unreasonable well-being is a prototype concept with 18 entrepreneurs from around the world. And the aim is to shine a light on various aspects of well-being, really, from sleep, exercise, nutrition, meditation, and of course, breathing. And that's why we've got a master here today to ask you a bunch of questions and learn how we can breathe better. And guys, just so you are familiar and know, Patrick, he's written 7 books, 3 Amazon bestsellers, including the international bestseller, The Oxygen Advantage, widely regarded as one of the world's leading breathing re-education experts, trained over 5,000 people, including Olympic and professional athletes, in reduced breathing exercises. Patrick, so good to have you here and have you with these entrepreneurs. And my first question is a simple one, I guess, but we all breathe, right? And we're all doing it right now, and everyone looks alive and awake. And why are you so passionate about breathing, and why write a book about it?
I suppose it's it's through breathing you can influence all of the major disciplines of health and performance. And if we were talking about health, we're talking about respiration, we're talking about sleep, we're talking about movement, we're talking about mental health. And we can also tie that in also, of course, with dentistry and orthodontics, because children who mouth breathe, it can influence the development of their faces. So for example, all mouth breathing children develop crooked teeth. But it's also performance. Breathing is not distributed equally to everyone. You know, I suppose we have to look at what happens if you have a genetic predisposition towards anxiety or panic. You're 80% more likely to have dysfunctional breathing patterns. What happens if you are experiencing high stress and burnout? 100% of people with burnout, when it has been studied, have hyperventilation syndrome. So our breathing changes in response to the environment that we're in. But if I was to tie in, Ross, it's through your breath that you can influence the 2 most important traits in business. And those most important traits are concentration and attention span. And concentration is your ability to hold your attention on one thing. And your attention span is how long you can hold your attention on one thing. These 2 traits are the most important for anybody to produce quality of work. Society demands it. Even the child in school needs to be able to concentrate and focus and have good attention span. The student in university, the person going into the workforce. So society demands it, but nobody is teaching us how. And when people then say, well, let's do mindfulness, we have to bear this in mind. Mindfulness is wonderful, but it was developed 2,500 years ago. It does not address dysfunctional breathing patterns. And nor, if you have an individual with sleep disorder breathing, it is not going to address that. For concentration and focus and attention span, the hierarchy is deep sleep. That's number 1. And if you don't get deep sleep, forget about the rest. Functional breathing is number 2. And it's not just about taking this full and big breath, because oftentimes what we hear in the Western world is that the more air you breathe, the more blood flow and oxygen delivery to the brain. It's incorrect. It's absolutely the wrong thing to do if your objective is to increase blood flow and oxygen delivery to the brain. I'll give you my story. The reason that I'm in this space was because of my own issues, going from childhood into teenage years into university. And I had dreadful sleep. I had undiagnosed sleep apnea, which I wasn't aware of at the time. But in university, I was told that I was stopping breathing during sleep. I was always tired. I was falling asleep at the desk. The school teacher thought that I had no interest in school. So here was I put through 10 or 15 years of education. And almost that society is telling me, if you don't do well here, you are not going to succeed and you're going to be out in the scrap heap by the time you're 20 or 25 years of age. I drove myself through university. But when I compared my concentration to that of my peers, it was very, very poor because I had a racing mind. And the reason that I had a racing mind, and by the way, I didn't have anxiety. I don't have a predisposition to anxiety, nor do I have a predisposition to panic disorder. But I had a stuffy nose, I had asthma, I had faster breathing, upper chest breathing, I had poor sleep. So physiologically, I was in a state of fight or flight. When your mind is in a state of fight or flight, you cannot focus and concentrate. So for me to get grades, it took 10 and 12 hours a day. And not every kid is going to be driven. But I came from a poor enough background. I had a major motivation. I had a major motivation to do well in life. And I put myself through university, Trinity College in Dublin, and a lot of work. And I'm nearly 50 years of age. 25 years ago, I came across the importance of functional breathing patterns and sleep, and it absolutely changed my life. And there was resistance to people hearing for it since, 2002, full time, I've been teaching it. The last 3 years has absolutely been phenomenal. And now we are working with SWAT. We have our instructors in the Navy SEALs, Air Forces, elite police, and even as so far, because when you think about why the military is going with this, many innovations are brought to us via the military route. And they will do, as one guy I was talking to about a week ago, he says, if you can make a difference, 0.5% here and 0.5% there, we will go with that. And it's through the breath that you can influence states. So if we think of a leader, the measure of a leader is not how well that leader performs when things are going well. A company runs itself when things are going well. The measure of the leader is what happens when the environment changes. That's the leader, the person who can get that company back on track, the person who has a clear and focused mind. But it is so common in the Western world, and it is increasingly common that people have a racing mind, and a racing mind is going to negatively impede concentration and focus. And unless you have your attention on doing what you're doing, your quality of work is not going to be good. We cannot be running from one thing to the other and one thing to the next without placing our attention on the present. And I don't mean this in a new age thinking sense, but I'm talking about attention span and concentration.
Wow, man, there's a lot in there. Jeez, and I want to take it back to almost the first thing you said was around children who sleep with their mouths open suffer with crooked teeth, right? And that's not just children, that's throughout adulthood, right? That people can have crooked teeth from breathing through the mouth. And I'm just wondering how that works. I'm sure everybody's like, how on earth does that work? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So our ancestors were innate nasal breathers, and a young infant baby is an innate nasal breather. So, if we think of the human mouth in terms of breathing, if I was to ask a medical doctor, what does the mouth do in terms of the breath? The doctor will have no answer. The mouth does nothing. The mouth is simply a hole whereby air comes straight down the throat into the lungs. So when we are young, with our mouth closed, our lips together, our tongue should be resting in the roof of the mouth. And as the tongue rests in the roof of the mouth, it exerts pressures against the top jaw, which is the maxilla. And the tongue is wide and U-shaped. By having the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, the tongue develops the shape of the top jaw. And when the top jaw is wide and U-shaped, there is plenty of room for teeth. All mouth-breathing kids develop crooked teeth. Not only do they develop crooked teeth, a mouth-breathing child is more prone to sleep problems. And if we look at a study by Karen Bonnick published in the Journal of Pediatrics in 2012, children with sleep disorder breathing, of which includes snoring, if it untreated by age 5, these children have a 40% increased risk of special education needs by age 8. Now, if we look at the stats in children who are mouth breathing, it's between 25 to 50% of the studied population. These kids can have maybe nasal obstruction. They may have a stuffy nose. They may have enlarged adenoids. They could have enlarged tonsils. Their sleep is impacted, but it does impact the development of their airway. And whatever takes place during childhood, those changes will continue lifelong. So when we're talking about sleep disorder breathing, the human face is changing and the human airway is getting smaller. And as a result, it's increasing the risk of resistance to breathing during sleep. And when you think of, the effect that sleep disorder breathing is having on the population, not just productivity, but 20% of road traffic accidents and many health conditions. When you hear of an individual dying because of a heart-related condition at the age of 40 or 50 years of age, say, for example, a rugby player, because these guys are bigger guys, they've got a wider neck circumference, they're more prone to sleep problems, and sleep problems put a pressure on the heart.
It's funny, since I did your course a couple of weeks ago, I have 11-month-old son. So every night I walk in at like just before after he's gone to sleep, and I'm like, is he breathing through his mouth? And I keep shutting his mouth, keep shutting his mouth.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a good practice. And
yeah,
our ancestors did it. There was a book written back in the 1870s. It's called Shut Your Mouth and Save Your Life. And it was by an American painter called George Catlin. And he went to live with the North American Indians because he thought their traditions were dying out. So he went to paint their traditions. And he wrote this book because he's seen that the Native American mother, every time the child had the mouth open, the mom would go over and gently press the lips together. None of this information is new. This has been around, it's documented since 1909. But it really does come back down to sleep. And people talk about sleep hygiene and have a cold bedroom or a cool bedroom and, don't drink alcohol, don't eat late at night. The elephant in the room when it comes to sleep is breathing in and out through your nose. And it's also having light and slow breathing. Because if you have your mouth open during sleep and if you wake up with a dry mouth in the morning, and our group here of 12 participants, it's likely that about 5 of you are waking up with a dry mouth in the morning. And if you're waking up with a dry mouth in the morning, you are not waking up feeling refreshed. Simple things. If you change your breathing to breathing through the nose, it can have a huge impact on your sleep. And I'm talking about deep sleep. And it's only with deep sleep that you will have concentration, you will have that focused mind. So again, I'm currently writing a book on this topic because it's so vital and society does demand it, the workplace demands it, but nobody is teaching how. And that's when we have to bring in these ingredients.
amazing. The mouth tape that I bought from you guys, I was
The
telling you
myotape.
guys on. Yeah, the Myo tape. I've been using it for a couple of weeks now. My deep sleep, I'm tracking it through Fitbit, which I think is pretty good. But my deep sleep's gone from 1 hour and 20 to 1 hour and 40 most nights. And it's like, that's quite a lot of deep sleep, right? An extra 20 minutes a night is pretty good. I'll take that.
Everything makes a difference. And,
Yeah, for
people
sure.
tracking with devices such as Oura Ring and the Garmin, heart rate variability. It also makes a difference to heart rate variability. And that's an objective measurement of resilience. So, you see it in the corporate world. Think of this, Ross. If there was a difficult situation to be sorted out and you had 2 staff members, one staff member has a racing mind and the other staff member is calm, collected and focused, who are you going to give the difficult situation to be sorted out to? Are you going to give it to the staff member who has the racing mind? Or are you going to give it to the staff member who's calm, collected and focused? I know who I would be giving it to.
Oh yeah. Patrick, you talked about the mouth being almost like useless in the art of breathing.
Totally.
So why is the nose so special? Can you talk us through how it works and why it is the best tool for breathing with?
Well, I suppose it's been developed and designed throughout our evolution specifically only for nasal breathing, for breathing through the nose, and of course smelling. Even our attention is better when we breathe through our nose. And this was a recent study that was looked at individuals who were shown scary faces, and they were tested on their recall versus nasal breathing and mouth breathing, and they had a better recall with nasal breathing. Nasal breathing also improves visuospatial awareness, and that would be very important. Say, for example, sports performance, whereby you have your focus on the ball, but you also have to be reading and scanning everything else that's going on. Nasal breathing, as I said, it improves your sleep, but it also filters and moistens and warms and regulates breathing volume. Your nose is also activating greater amplitude of the diaphragm breathing muscle. And the diaphragm breathing muscle is not just for respiration, but also provides stabilization for the spine. So you think of a weightlifter lifting a weight, the weightlifter will typically breathe in and hold their breath. And as they breathe in, the diaphragm is moving downwards and the abdomen becomes like a pneumatic balloon to provide stabilization. So for example, 50% of people with lower back pain have dysfunctional breathing. So then you could think of professions who are prone to lower back pain. So I had a talk with individuals this morning, and dentists fall into that category because they're hunched over. So functional breathing could play a role there, and nasal breathing is the key. I think the biggest one, Ross, is when you breathe through your nose, it slows down your breathing, and it slows down the breath in, and it also slows down the exhalation. And if we look at the breath in versus the breath out, it's through the exhalation that we can decide if we want to stress the body or if we want to relax the body. So during the inhalation, the vagus nerve, which is a nerve that's wandering throughout the human body, it steps back. But the exhalation is primarily under the control of the parasympathetic nervous system, or the body's rest and digest response. If we breathe in slow, and if we breathe out fast, we stress the body. If we breathe in fast, and if we breathe out fast, we stress the body. But it's not the inhalation that counts, it's the exhalation. So for example, the popular technique, Wim Hof technique, that's based on fast breathing, hard breathing. It's a stressor. Now, many people are already in that sympathetic nervous drive activation. They don't necessarily need to be stressed further. They need to be shown how to downregulate. And we can do that through the exhalation. So for example, I'm working with military, and I'll use this as an example. Breathing while shooting a gun. Now, I've only shot a gun once in my life, so I have to say I'm so far removed from this environment. But this is where you can get an insight into the human physiology. If you can imagine an elite police person coming upon a situation, and if that person, that police officer, has to shoot, if that police officer is so stressed out, that police officer is going to make a mistake. How do we down-regulate to the point that there's enough stress, not too much, not too little, but just right? We can do it on the exhalation. So anytime that you're feeling stressed, if you're in the corporate world or you're something going on, and if you want to do a 90-second reset, breathe in slowly through your nose and have a relaxed and a slow and prolonged exhalation out through your nose. And by extending the length of the exhalation, a very gentle and soft exhalation out through the nose, it stimulates the vagus nerve, which secretes a substance called acetylcholine. And acetylcholine causes a slowing of the heart. And when the heart slows, the brain interprets that the body is in a safe environment. And the brain in turn is going to send signaling to the body on the basis of that. Now, conversely, if, for example, you are feeling stressed, we normally get faster breathing, upper chest breathing. How does the brain read that? The brain reads fast and upper chest breathing during rest and during sleep, that the body is in an unsafe environment. And that's when we can adapt to the primitive mechanisms of survival, which would include freeze. How many people freeze up when they are in high stress? But do they understand that you can bring yourself out of that state? So the officer is shooting the gun. We are teaching, or I'm teaching them, is during the exhalation that you breathe into the trigger, because these guys are already stressed and I want to down regulate them. I don't want them to breathe in and hold their breath and shoot, but I want them to have a normal breath in through the nose and a gentle and slow and prolonged exhalation, and to shoot on the exhalation, to squeeze the trigger. So this is just an example of influencing autonomic states. And maybe that example isn't a good one because people might say, well, shooting a gun isn't an ideal example. It's an example. However, mouth breathers are more prone to fast and upper chest breathing. If you look down at your chest, and take a breath through the mouth. And also when you breathe through your mouth, how fast are you breathing? Mouth breathing is fast breathing. Mouth breathing is upper chest breathing. And fast and upper chest breathing, as I said, the brain is interpreting that the body is in an unsafe environment. Now, this also comes with sleep, because if, for example, you have your mouth open during sleep and you're breathing using the upper chest and you're breathing fast, your brain also reads this, that the body is in an unsafe environment and you will be waken out of your deep sleep. So people who wake up after maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and they wake up and they're not quite alert enough to get up, but they're not quite exhausted enough to go back to sleep. And this is a very challenging time. So this is where slow breathing can come in. But it's not just about breathing slow. Breathing has much more of a depth. So for example, you can decongest your airways by holding your breath. So if you want to try this, but don't do it if you're pregnant, or don't do it if you have serious medical conditions. If you have a stuffy nose, and even for people experiencing COVID, one of the symptoms is nasal obstruction. And you can help to decongest your breath using this. Take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose with your fingers and gently nod your head, holding your breath. And continue until a fairly strong air hunger, and then let go, but to breathe in through your nose. So continue until a strong air hunger. That's been known since 1923. Now, the significance of this is that nasal obstruction, you are 2 to 3 times more likely to have sleep disorder breathing. So the poor kid in school with the stuffy nose, and as a result, the child is more likely to breathe through the mouth. That child physiologically is in a state of fight or flight because of fast and upper chest breathing, but also that child's snoring and sleep disorder breathing is likely to influence their cognitive development. And none of this is my opinion. But the problem with this information is that it has been buried in the literature and it hasn't got out into the public domain. Because if parents knew and understood the importance of breathing through the nose for many common conditions with children, and one of those conditions, of course, is asthma. When we think that asthma affects 10% of the Western population, 8 to 10%, and these children are often, because if you have inflammation of your lungs, it travels up to your nose. And if you have a stuffy nose, you're more likely to breathe through an open mouth, and your sleep is impacted. And any of you here with asthma, you don't just have asthma, you're also more likely to be tired. These kids are tired. But yet, no organization in the world has been teaching these children to breathe through their nose. It's common sense, it's logical, and there are no side effects. And it is only through the nose. And there is a gas called nitric oxide, first discovered on the exhale breath of the human being in 1991. This gas is antiviral. So now, for example, there is an FDA inhaler that has just come on the market for COVID, and it's a nitric oxide inhaler. And tests have shown this simple nitric oxide inhaler to be highly effective in stopping and reducing COVID. Now, this is not a vaccine. This is a very, very simple, natural solution. But your nose also is a source of nitric oxide. And I'm not going to say that nasal breathing is going to stop COVID. But what I am saying is whatever chance you have of reducing viral load, it's only by breathing in and out through the nose and not through the mouth. So there's a few things with COVID, because oftentimes associated with that, the breathing rate is faster in upper chest. And when you're breathing as fast, it's very difficult for you to do slow breathing. So in terms of getting your breathing under control, whenever you feel panicked or whenever you feel high stress, or if, for example, the individual is suffering from COVID, there are a little breathing exercise that can be very, very helpful in getting breathing under control. Just as I'm talking to you, I'm actually looking for that paper on nitric oxide, because I think it's a very interesting one, and it just points, just so that I can just back it up a little bit. So this was published in Elsevier in May, June of 2020. Could nasal nitric oxide help to mitigate the severity of COVID-19? And the researchers wrote about the importance of nasal breathing during sleep to reduce viral load. So for example, here is the paper here. Now, when you scroll down through that paper, okay, this is only the abstract. I don't have the full one, but this anyway is the title. So the nasal cavity and turbinates play important physiological functions by filtering, warming, and humidifying inhaled air. Paranasal sinuses continuously produce nitric oxide, a reactive oxygen species that diffuses to the bronchi and lungs to produce bronchodilatory. So it opens up the airways. This is what I was talking about, kids and adults with asthma. Vasodilatory. It helps to open up the blood vessels in the lungs. It allows a better gas transfer to take place. So nitric oxide, simple devices that promote nasal breathing during sleep, may help to prevent a common cold, suggesting potential benefits against coronavirus infection. Now you think of all of the poor countries in the world that don't have access to medication. And for 20 years, I would expect a 50% reduction in asthma symptoms, 50% within 2 weeks. Now there are millions of children suffering from asthma. Nobody is teaching these kids simple breathing techniques. And, especially with a country when they don't have the medication and when they don't have the resources to help these kids. But no child or adult with a respiratory condition should be breathing through the open mouth. It's only the nose, and it's the nose as the organ that is the first line of defense for air coming into the body. Now, if you're feeling stressed and panic, here is a simple exercise to help get your breathing under control. And this also stimulates the vagus nerve. So whenever you're ready, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go. Breathe in through your nose and breathe normal for 10 seconds. So now you just breathe normal for 10 seconds. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go. Breathe in through your nose and breathe normal for 10 seconds. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go. Breathe in through your nose and to breathe normal for 10 seconds. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go and breathe in through your nose and to breathe normal for 10 seconds. And again, take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go. Breathe in through your nose and to breathe normal for 10. Okay. That exercise is one that you could use with an emergency. It's very helpful if people are having, say, asthma symptoms or COVID, because oftentimes with COVID, the respiratory rate is so fast that the person cannot control their breathing at all. Now, the interesting thing about COVID, in a review that was done by doctors at Mount Sinai Hospital, and that's based in New York, that patients with long COVID have low carbon dioxide. Now, carbon dioxide is not just a waste gas that many people think it is, but it performs a number of very important functions. So, for example, here, this was a review that was conducted, and the quest at Mount Sinai began with a mystery during the first wave of the coronavirus pandemic in New York City. Okay, I'm just going to scroll down to the very end. So I'll just show you this paragraph here, because I'll show you how to normalize carbon dioxide. So back at Mount Sinai, the push for answers continued. Preliminary observations were yielding more data. When Petrino's team looked at patients' carbon dioxide levels, it was found, in italics, all the patients all the patients had low CO2 levels when they first came to be treated. After doing the breathwork exercises, patients' symptoms abated. The team plans to measure whether their CO2 levels rose. Seeing clinical reasoning payoff was reassuring. So here are exercises that can be put out there for free. And in March of 2020, I did a 40-minute Zoom call, but it was oversubscribed, 100 people booked in. So then I decided to put the video that I recorded up on YouTube. And about 800,000 people have looked at the video. And probably a couple of thousand of those have put comments. And many of those people who looked at that video had COVID. There are simple techniques to help improve oxygen uptake in the blood, to help improve oxygen transfer, to normalize carbon dioxide, to help calm the respiratory rate. It's not the normal techniques. With breathing, we have to go much deeper, and the breathing exercises need to be tailored to the individual, but not everybody goes down to the depth. But I'm going to show you a couple of exercises for you to experiment. This is an exercise to help increase carbon dioxide in the blood. And this is an exercise that we do to down-regulate before sleep. So you can imagine somebody who is overstimulated, so much information, and they've had a stressful day, and then they go to bed at night, but their mind is in a state of agitation, and they cannot fall asleep so quickly. How do you help switch off in order to help achieve a deeper sleep? What I would like you to do is have one hand on your chest and put one hand just above your navel. And I would like you to tune into your breathing pattern and use this as a measurement of your attention span. For how long can you hold your attention on your breathing for before your mind wanders? And every time that your mind wanders, bring your attention back onto the breath. I would like you to feel the slightly colder air coming into your nose and the slightly warmer air as it leaves your nose. And your breathing should be in and out through the nose and silent. And now I would like you to slow down the speed of the air coming into your nose. Can you breathe in so slowly, almost that the fine hairs within the nostrils do not move? And at the top of the breath, to have such a relaxed and slow feeling that you have such a slow and relaxed exhalation. And after you have a slow and relaxed exhalation, take a very soft and gentle breath coming into your nose. You breathe almost imperceptibly into your nose, and at the top of the breath, a really relaxed and a slow exhalation. The whole objective here is to slow down your breathing so much that you feel air hunger. Air hunger signifies that carbon dioxide is increased in the blood. So I'm deliberately having you breathe less air so that you feel air hunger. So continue gently softening and slowing down the breath. Take about 20 to 30% less air into your body. What happens to your body when you breathe less air? Pay attention to the saliva in the mouth. Pay attention to the internal temperature of your fingers. Pay attention to whether you feel drowsy. If you want to down-regulate, breathe less air. If you want to influence your blood circulation, breathe less air. If you want to influence oxygen delivery to the tissues, breathe less air. So, for example, I was doing an exam. I was highly stressed. And 3 minutes before the exam, I took a short walk. And during that time, I took full big breaths because everybody was telling me, if you're stressed, take a deep breath. So I took full big breaths. This is going back 25 years ago. For about 3 minutes before I went into the exam. And I walked into the exam, I was totally spaced out and I was lightheaded. Full big breaths does not increase blood flow to the brain. Instead, it gets rid of too much carbon dioxide from the blood through the lungs. When you take full big breaths, your blood vessels constrict. That's very important for people to realize. I had you breathe less air there. And if you practice this in the comfort of your own home, even if you just put your hands out in front of you and breathe less air and see, can you influence the blood circulation in your hands? Because it's very common with people with faster breathing and upper chest breathing that they have cold hands and cold feet. But of course, it's not just the blood vessels in your fingers and feet that are constricted. It's the 70,000 miles of blood vessels throughout the human body. An idea has got out there about breathing, that the more air you breathe, the better. That is not true. We as human beings, we need a certain amount of food each day. Not too much, not too little. We also need to drink a certain amount of water each day, not too much and not too little. And with breathing, it's the same. Not too much, not too little. But the stresses and strains of everyday life, and especially chronic stress, because the human being, we are not able to cope with chronic stress. We've never had to cope with chronic stress. Throughout our evolution, we were confronted with short-term stressors. We are great at dealing with short-term stress. It's necessary that we experience short-term stress, but we have no coping mechanism for long-term stress. Long-term stress makes people sick, and on the basis that it makes them sick, relaxation helps to make them better. And it's through the breath that you can bring the body and mind into relaxation.
Wow, man. There's a few questions coming in the chat here, and I'd love to get to these in just a sec. But I wanted to spin it really quickly to fitness, because a core part of what we're doing on this well-being prototype is around functional fitness is the core of it, I guess. So everyone's on their own fitness journey, and I wondered how breathing through the nose relates to recovery, to better fitness overall. What does that look like?
Well, initially, when you switch from mouth to nose breathing, you're going to feel an increased air hunger. And the reason being is because your nose is a smaller entry to the body than the mouth. But the air hunger tells you that carbon dioxide is increased in the blood. But carbon dioxide is not all that bad, because it plays a number of very important functions in the human body, including opening up your blood vessels, but also causing hemoglobin to release oxygen to the tissues. So if you do your physical exercise with your mouth closed, carbon dioxide increases in the blood and you feel increased air hunger. But this also causes a training adaptation to take place. And if you do continued physical exercise with your mouth closed, your body adapts to a higher pressure of carbon dioxide. Your body can cope with increased CO2 in the blood. And as a result, then your breathlessness reduces. This has been very understudied, but one sports scientist has been looking at it. And his name is Dr. George Dallam, D-A-L-L-A-M. And basically he got 10 recreational athletes and he had them breathe through their nose exclusively for 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, he tested them. They were able to achieve 100% of their work rate intensity, but with 22% less ventilation. And also the fraction of expired oxygen was less. So the body was utilizing oxygen better. So if we think of the importance of nasal breathing during exercise, nose breathing protects the upper airways. So for people who are prone to exercise-induced bronchoconstriction, breathing through the mouth causes moisture to be sucked out of the upper airways and causes the airways to narrow. Nasal breathing conserves moisture in the human body. There's 42% greater water loss breathing out through the mouth versus out through the nose. Your nose not only moistens the air on the way in, but it recovers the heat and moisture from the breath on the way out. Your nose is harnessing greater amplitude of the diaphragm, and your diaphragm breathing muscle is providing stabilization for the spine. Functional breathing and functional movement go together. And this is getting more attention. So for example, I'm going to see if I can pull up a paper by Kyle Kiesel. And he tested 51 subjects. And he came up with a screening tool of assessing for breathing pattern disorders. So the tool is as follows. Now, if you look at this here, dysfunctional breathing, so he's a professor of physical therapy, has been linked to health conditions including lower back pain, neck pain. It adversely affects the musculoskeletal systems. Individuals with dysfunctional breathing often have decreased pain thresholds. Now, by the way, this is very common with females, and especially during days 10 to days 22 of the monthly cycle, when there's an increase in progesterone and estrogen. And progesterone is a respiratory stimulant. Carbon dioxide levels can drop by up to 25%. Pain thresholds decrease, pain perception increases, anxiety and panic can kick in, and fatigue. And despite this being written about for females, female breathing is different to male breathing since 1905. Most females are not aware of it, unfortunately. And females who have a very difficult time with PMS, they could be helped significantly if they were aware of the relationship between changes in hormones and changes in breathing. Because the thing about breathing is you can influence it. Impaired motor control, balance, movement. So they looked at 51 subjects. And the conclusion here of this study was that if you measure your breath hold time during rest, that gives you good feedback of whether you have a functional breathing pattern or dysfunctional. Dysfunctional breathing is a commonly occurring condition in the general population. It's estimated that as high as 50 to 80% of adults have some level of dysfunctional breathing. So normally it's about 20% of the population, but in the anxiety population, it's as high as 80%. Dysfunctional breathing, as I said, it's connected with lower back pain, neck pain, anxiety, and depression. Okay, so you can measure your breath hold time, and don't worry what you get. And basically you need a timer. Take it off.
Patrick,
Yes.
we did this actually. We did it
Oh, you
last.
did? Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
so everybody, I think pretty much on this call has done their control pause, so they've got
It's the same
a clear
thing.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, Ross. So Kiesel's paper, he concluded that if your breath hold time is above 25 seconds, there is an 89% chance that dysfunctional breathing is not present. Now, what does it mean if your breath hold time or your control pause or both score is 10 or 15 seconds? It means that you have disproportionate breathlessness during physical exercise. So I can give you this scenario. Imagine somebody who is training, physical training. It's your breathing outside of your training that determines how you breathe during your physical training. If you have your mouth open during sleep, if you're walking down the street with your mouth open, if you typically have a faster and upper chest respiratory pattern, that also is going to affect your breathing during physical exercise. So people with a poor breathing pattern, they are going to breathe poorly during exercise. And if you breathe poorly during exercise, you have disproportionate breathlessness. You've got increased muscle fatigue. So that's why changing breathing patterns is also very important. And I'm just going to pull up George Dallam's paper here. It's an interesting one. I'll just show you a couple of the data. And I'd like to show you as well, Ross, Karen Bonnock's paper. So here I'm going to do, I will do the test in a little while. This is the effect of nasal breathing versus oral breathing on physiological economy in recreational athletes. And I'm just going to scroll down to the results. So in ventilation in liters, ventilation in liters, 90 liters with nasal breathing and 117 liters with mouth breathing. Basically, people who were breathing through their nose, when they were trained to breathe through their nose, they had significantly less breathlessness. The fraction of expired oxygen with nasal breathing was less, 16.28, versus with mouth breathing, 16.89. The pressure of carbon dioxide in the blood was higher, 44.7. In other words, these individuals, because they did their physical exercise with their mouth closed, they had better carbon dioxide tolerance. And that's very important because carbon dioxide is the primary stimulus to breathe. Now, the test is as follows. You take a normal breath in through your nose, and out through your nose. You pinch your nose with your fingers, and you time it in seconds until you feel the first definite desire to breathe. And then you let go and you breathe in, and your breath should be normal. So coming back to COVID, we've seen people with COVID, long COVID, that their breath hold time was as low as 3 seconds. These people were not able to talk. They were so breathless, and their blood oxygen saturation dropping. And this is where breathing techniques can help, because you can do very simple breath hold exercises to help calm down their breathing, and also doing slow breathing to increase oxygen transfer from the lungs to the blood. I will show you this. This is not new information, but I remember reading the work of Luciano Bernardi, an Italian cardiologist, about 10 years ago. And then a patient came in to me with chronic heart failure. And I had her walk, but I was monitoring her blood oxygen saturation using a little finger probe. And her blood oxygen saturation was dropping down to 92%. And I said, this is not good. If she's desaturating while walking, it's not good. So I said to her, I need you to breathe in and out through your nose. And I had her put her hand either side of her lower ribs. And I said, I need you to breathe slow. Because if you breathe nose, low and slow, you increase oxygen transfer from the lungs into the blood. Now, if we think of COVID, one of the issues there is reduced blood oxygen saturation. And here is an example of climbers. And if you are into climbing, be careful how you breathe during ascent and at altitude. Because if you breathe mouth fast and shallow, you could be reducing your blood oxygen saturation. So if your objective is to improve your blood oxygen saturation at altitude, here's a study, 39 individuals at a height of 4,500 meters. Their blood oxygen saturation was 80%, which is severe hypoxia. The researchers asked them, or had the individuals to breathe slow to 6 breaths per minute. And by breathing 6 breaths per minute, their blood oxygen saturation increased from 80% to 89.5%. This is mild hypoxia. In study B, these individuals were at a height of 5,400 meters. Their blood oxygen saturation increased from 81% to 88.6% simply by slowing down breathing. Slow breathing, and when I use the word deep, I just mean lateral expansion and contraction of the lower ribs. But this improves ventilation efficiency for oxygen. And you can verify this by a blood oxygen saturation increase. So if your goal is to enhance oxygen transfer from the lungs to the blood, you can do this. Have your hands either side of your lower ribs. As you breathe in, to feel your ribs just gently moving out. And as you breathe out, you should not hear your breathing, by the way. As you breathe in, to feel your ribs move out, and as you breathe out, to feel your ribs move in. As you breathe in, your ribs to gently move out, and as you breathe out, for your ribs to gently move in. And now we are going to slow down breathing to 6 breaths per minute, to breathe in for 5 seconds and out for 5 seconds. So to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that just gives you an idea. That exercise will be very important for people who have respiratory distress and poor blood oxygen saturation. but also that same exercise has been proven to increase heart rate variability. So people who are disturbed by stress, either emotionally or physically, typically have low HRV, and HRV is an indicator of vagal tone. You can improve your resilience, because heart rate variability is a measure of resilience, by breathing through your nose during sleep, by breathing light so that you feel air hunger, by breathing slow to 6 breaths per minute, and by breathing deep. So the acronym that I use is LSD. Now I'm just going to show you the application of this, and then I'll go to any questions you have. For sleep apnea, and I had a review published in the Journal of Clinical Medicine a couple of months ago. I wrote it with 2 ear, nose and throat doctors, and breathing re-education and the phenotypes of sleep apnea. There is a huge application of breathing in sleep, and sleep apnea is so common. You know, we're talking about 43% of men aged from 50 to 70 years of age, and 27% of men aged from 30 to 50 years. And females, when they go through postmenopausal females, their sleep disorder breathing increases 300%. When I look at breathing across 3 different dimensions. It's not enough just to focus on the biomechanics, nor is it enough to focus on resonance frequency breathing, nor on the biochemistry, because they all overlap. And what often happens in breathing is that the focus is on one, but the other dimension gets sacrificed. Now, the piece that's holding them all together is breathing in and out through the nose. And nose breathing is vital, not just for adults, but also for children. And if we want children to become engineers and to get into high professions, they need to have good cognitive development. It's not going to happen if children have sleep disorder breathing, because their brains are developing during the formative years. And if they have disruptions to their sleep, it's impacting cognitive development for the entire child's life.
Amazing. Thanks, Patrick.
No problem.
I know there's 6 minutes left, and I do want to finish and respect everybody's time and yours as well. 2 things that I'd love, if we could, to increase our control pause. Some of us might be 15, 20 seconds. I know when we did the course, it was ideally you want to get to around 40 seconds, so you're not triggered by certain responses and going into dysfunctional breathing. One technique, how to increase that control pause.
Set a goal of 25 seconds plus, because that's a realistic goal to achieve. It's functional breathing. Nose breathe both during the day and during sleep. It's really, really vitally important to get the mouth closed. Do your physical exercise with your mouth closed. Initially, you feel it's a little bit more uncomfortable, but it's a much better workout. And if you have a deviated septum, it might help to get just nasal dilators. These are little plastic devices that help open up the nose. So therefore, you'll be able to maximize airflow. And also then practice 15 minutes of reduced breathing volume before you go to sleep to down regulate. And anytime that you want to reset throughout the day, take your attention out of the mind and onto the breath, and slow down your breathing to the point of air hunger. Now, if you do a cumulative 40 to 60 minutes of nose breathing and breathing light, so that's including your physical exercise, that's including your rest, that's including a reset before sleep, that will increase your breath hold time, your control pause, and your bolt score. So it is practice, Ross, but it's worth it, because I suppose maybe some people here, you never thought that your stuffy nose was because of your breathing pattern, or your cold hands and feet, or waking up tired in the morning, how it's influencing it, etc. I'm just going to look at a question here. What tips and techniques exercise can be used to maximize our deep sleep? So the biggest one that I would say is 15 minutes of reduced volume breathing before sleep is absolutely key. There are so many breathing techniques taught with exhaling through the mouth, like the 4-7-8 breath to decrease stress level. What's the logic behind this? So you're inhaling for 4. I'm assuming that's a suspension of the breath for 7. exhaling for 8. It's not going to suit everybody. The logic there is to stimulate the vagus nerve, that you're having a slow and prolonged exhalation. I would be giving a very general breathing exercise like that. Many people will have difficulty with it, because if you think of 4 and 7 is 11 and 8 is 19, and 19 into 60, you're talking about 3 breaths per minute. Many people won't achieve that. And the risk is, with a 4, 7, 8 breath, how much air are you breathing during that breath? And there's no mention of that. So I would tend to focus on, for sleep apnea, getting the mouth closed with the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. And if you're anyway scientific, read that the review I just put up there. I'll share it because it's simple enough. And light breathing is focusing on breathing less air so that you feel air hunger. Slow breathing is breathing to 6 breaths per minute, which we did. And deep breathing is lateral expansion and contraction of the lower ribs. But yeah, if you're waking up with a dry mouth in the morning, that's the first thing that I would address.
I'm sorry, Patrick. Just because I posed the question. Thank you very much. When
Sure.
with the sleep apnea, they say like you sleep on your side, then sleeping on your back. Is there for you a significant difference in terms of the posture when you sleep?
There can be. 50% of people with sleep apnea, their apnea is double when they sleep on their back. So if you're lying on your back, I suppose you have to think of gravity. Where is the tongue going to go? But into the airway. Where is the mandible going to go? But back into the throat. Now, if you want to sleep on your back, now you may be fine, because it's 50% of the population with sleep apnea. So you may be the 50% that's not affected by back sleeping. But the other option would be to sleep on an incline, so that there's less likely for the tongue to fall back into the airway. Yeah.
Solveig, a last quick question, and then we'll say thank you. Go for it, bud.
Maybe this is an issue that other people here have. I've never actually been a mouth breather. I've never heard of them until we got introduced to them. My mum always closed our mouths when we were young, but I think that was more about just looking proper.
But she was correct.
Yeah. Anyway, so I sometimes grind my teeth at night, and I've seen doctors about this. And actually, I've been advised to try to fall asleep with my mouth open to kind of avoid
Doesn't make
that.
sense.
So
absolutely
yeah,
does not make sense.
How does this tie in?
Because bruxing during sleep can be because of sleep disorder breathing, including sleep apnea. And if you have your mouth open during sleep, you're significantly more at risk to have sleep apnea. And if you look at the paper, the article that I sent there, if you go through that, you'll see the stats that I gave with mouth breathing versus nasal breathing. If bruxing is during the day, it can be linked with stress. And if it's during sleep, it can be linked with sleep disorder breathing. I would definitely get the mouth closed. And I would also practice breathing light and breathing slow. And temporomandibular joint pain is much more significant in females than it is in men. And that can be related also to bruxing and can be related to the monthly cycle. So to track your breathing throughout the monthly cycle, and to see if the control pause or bolt score dips during the mid-luteal to mid-follicular phase. Now, there's probably a mineral aspect or component here kicking in with bruxing, but I don't know the mineral. I have a feeling it's magnesium, but if maybe just to talk to a very good nutritionist and just see if there's a connection between bruxing, it can be due to a deficiency of a mineral, but I don't know which mineral.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Patrick.
We're done, guys.
People can find you on The Oxygen Advantage is the book, which is amazing. I've read that. I did link to it in our WhatsApp group the other day. If anybody wants to go dive deeper, they can do the Potato training with you, right? That's what I did. And the Oxygen Advantage training, which takes it to a whole nother level. So if people have time and bandwidth to do that, I would highly recommend it. I learned a ton.
There's 2-hour course as well. So 2-hour courses for people who might be just wanting to, if they have asthma or if they have sleep disorders or anxiety, or a 2-hour course for sports. So there's different courses. So you don't necessarily need to become an instructor. I give 2-hour workshops every few weeks, small group of people, and I go through all of the exercises.
Beautiful. Guys,
Okay.
let's give Patrick a huge round of applause. Thank you, Patrick, for being here,
Thanks,
my friend.
guys.
Yeah, take care. See you.
Take
Bye.
care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you guys. See you next week.
Thanks, Ross. It was great.
No worries.
Thanks for us
All right.
organizing
Good night,
this.
team. Bye, guys.